Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben. These are my tomes, and today we're going to talk about everything I read in the last week, which is essentially just everything I read for Summerween. Yes, it is the spooky season as we are wrapping up my reads for Summerween. Now, not everything I read for Summerween was horror themed, but I do try to gravitate toward the horror reads for this readathon. I already covered the first couple of days of the readathon in the last wrap-up video, so head over there to see my first couple of horror titles that I took a look at. For the latter half of the readathon, I jumped into a lot more of my longer novels and the things that I had on hand that I just need to get off my shelf. We'll start off with Violet by Scott Thomas. Now, Scott Thomas is an author that I've read before. I took a look at Kill Creek. It was a rather fast-paced haunted house story that I really enjoyed and dealt a lot with kind of this meta-narrative of different authors, different horror authors and their approach to the genre. This is a little bit more of a slow burn. I know the cover literally says, the blurb here just says, "Don't let anybody tell you this book is a slow burn." But that's by Josh Mallerman, and I don't like Josh Mallerman, so I'm just going to ignore what he says. This takes a very long time to settle into the actual horror of the book. Once it gets there, it's very much in the same style as Kill Creek, with a lot more of this atmospheric horror, backed by a lot of emotion and character depth. Getting up to that point was at times a little bit of a slog. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy character development and like easing into the story. I even praised Witchcraft for Wayward Girls for taking a good 120 pages just to establish the characters and the setting before they got into any of the spooky elements. But here I felt like it was a little bit too much. We have a mother and daughter going back to the mother's like summer home getaway house that she used to have, that she spent while her mother was sick, which is a key element of her backstory. But when they get there, they find it overrun with weeds, dilapidated, falling apart, and I don't know if I needed so much detail about all the little things that she does around the house. A scene or two to establish that they are fixing up the house and they are having relationship issues, or that their relationship is on the mend a little bit at the start of the book, would have been enough. But it goes into excruciating detail, like chapters and chapters of going to the hardware store and picking up these items and then going back, and the different projects they do around the house. You could argue that it's that gothic style of, slowly creeping horror, and it does build a little bit over the course of that first half of the book, but it was just too slow for me at points. Once the horror gets going, once the entity is revealed and we have some sort of sense of where it's coming from and what it's been doing, then the story really kicks off. We do have a number of really entertaining scenes toward the end that play with perception, and it still is a story that has a lot of heart and emotion in it. It was effective in that regard, but I feel like getting through the lead up was just a little too much. I think this ended up as a 3-star for me, possibly a 4, can't quite remember. But it's not one that I'm looking forward to reading again in the future. I'm glad I read it, and there were parts of it that I really did enjoy. I think the world building as a whole and Scott Thomas's ability to tell a compelling horror story while keeping the emotional investment very high, and also telling a gripping and compelling story of people drifting apart and coming together. I just wish it had been done a little bit faster in some points and had been a little bit more punchy. And I don't remember that being an issue for Kill Creek. So if you've read Kill Creek and you're looking at Violet, just know that this is a very different paced story than what you got from the other book. Another horror book I wanted to get off my shelves during this readathon was Stage Fright by Garrett Boatman. This is one of the classic horror novels that I have that is part of the Paperbacks from Hell line. Now, these have been hit or miss for me. Mostly they've been okay. And I feel like this one was the most readable. It was the most entertaining I've had so far in that line. I go into these knowing that I'm looking at a particular moment in time when it comes to horror writing and writing conventions in general. I felt like overall the story was very interesting. It revolves around a dream machine and this new style of entertainment we have called Dreamies, where you can go and basically experience with all of your senses someone's dream or nightmare. The technology is explained in like the second chapter, but it doesn't super matter. It starts breaking down pretty quickly. Our arguably protagonist starts taking drugs in order to create more phantasmagorical dreamies. He finds through this process he's actually able to make dreamies come to life, or at least affect the real world. It's a little bit unclear exactly how this happens, and again, there's a little bit of hand waving going along with this, which is odd given the scientific explanation given early on in the book. But I found it vastly entertaining, and it was just an excuse to have monsters come to life and have these multiple revenge scenes where someone has slighted Izzy and then he goes to his dream machine and makes some sort of horrific nightmare creature pop up and tear them apart. There are some rather gruesome deaths within the book, but they're done in that kind of over-the-top slasher style where it never became off-putting. Where the book is really dated is its views on women, largely, and also the drug culture of the time. There is a group of Izzy fans that, of course, smoke weed and make the most cringiest, stupidest lines, the most ridiculous observations. But I don't think they're supposed to be heroic characters. I don't think they're supposed to be people you look up to, even in the context of the book. There's maybe one that's a standout of someone who does something courageous or does something meaningful. I think largely they're there for comedy relief, which no longer hits, and also as more fodder for the gruesome murder scenes. Where this book kind of faltered for me, even outside of understanding it's from a different time, is the pacing. So early on, there are multiple scenes of like a setup. Izzy gets slighted in some way, and then there's a setup for a murder, an attempted murder of another character in these like crazy dream sequences, which was a lot of fun. Became formulaic after a while. The final scene goes on for far too long. It is well over 100 pages just for this one concert at the end, and I felt like it really dragged the pacing down a lot when these characters are just gently shuffling down a hallway trying to break the illusion around them. It goes into such detail about all the things that are happening around it, and we've already had spectacle. This should be the part where your story is winding down. There's a part where they get up to Izzy and they're about to confront him, and then they're thrown in to this other location and they have to deal with that. And so I really felt like that dragged quite a bit. But again, as far as the Paperbacks from Hell line goes, these books from, I want to say 60s, 70s, 80s, this one's from 88, I believe. This has been the most entertaining so far. There is, unfortunately, no guitar playing skeleton within the book. The intro mentions that at the time that it was being published, the word dream was considered anathema to the powers that be at the publishing company that was getting this book published. And so he wanted to call it Death Dream, and they're like, dream's out. We got to come up with something else. And so he called it Stage Fright. They gave that name to an artist. He came up with this rad as hell cover that unfortunately has nothing to do with the book itself. And was part of the reason why I picked it up, in all honesty. Marketing's doing something right. The next book I read was Flashlight by Susan Choi. This was one of my 25 for 2025 for this year, and also my attempt at expanding my horizons and reading a little bit more literary fiction. This one was, again, not great for the pacing. I felt like there were characters in here that I really disliked, and we spent an awful lot of time with them. There is definitely purple prose going on here. I read a section to my wife where there's a character looking into someone else's eyes, and they describe them for like 3 sentences, and the character is just like, no. Like, where they're responding to a question. So there's like this huge beat of this unnecessary description in the middle of a conversation. It felt really odd, felt really superfluous. Like, there was no reason for there to be so much just prose that's doing nothing. It's not, you've already established these characters' feelings toward each other. You don't need to continuously harp on it. I really feel without the East Asian connection, because this largely centers around North and South Korea, China, Japan, and America, and deals a lot with the history of those different areas. I feel like without that history and without that backstory, I would have been far less entertained and interested in this book. There was actually a point where we were describing, early on, you meet one of the characters. It's the daughter of the main family, and she feels insufferable. I did not like her at all. And she's meeting with a psychiatrist at like 8 years old, and of course she's like so intelligent and so observant, and it's just one of these archetypes that I really can't stand. This like hyper intelligent child who's just so done with the world, so disaffected. And I mean, you come to learn why she has the attitude that she does, which is helpful. But the point I'm making is it was a slog to get through that chapter, and then there was a very interesting chapter that goes back and talks about her father, whose family was Korean, but they immigrated to Japan during the war in order to have a more stable life. And he goes to school, he goes to a Japanese school, and he's good at school, so he starts identifying more with his school life than his home life. The school gives him a Japanese name. He responds more to that name and more with that identity. It dealt a lot with culture and identity and the politics of North and South Korea and Japan, and all those parts were incredibly interesting to me, having lived there and having been interested in that part of the world for so long. But I don't know, like, just some of the characters just didn't work for me. Many of them are like angry and sad and mean, and it's just like depressing to read about them. The end of this book was, I don't even know if I would call it bittersweet. It was just sad. It was depressing. And I guess that was kind of the aim of the book. But I don't know. I ended up giving it 3 stars because of my interest in the subject matter. But I feel like this has largely cemented my distaste for literary fiction outside of the classroom that isn't highly focused on some sort of interest of mine. Because, again, 3 stars because of the history that's in here and less to do with the characters or with the story. And it might just be that I'm not a fan of character-driven narratives, or at least character-driven narratives with these types of characters. I don't know. I'm still going to give literary fiction a shot. I'm still going to pick it up occasionally, but I feel like this really did make it clear to me that that is just not my genre. And lastly, this week I did read Tenement, which is the last published volume in the Bone Orchard mythos by Jeff Lemire. Of all the Bone Orchard mythos entries, this was the one that I felt had the most straightforward story, although it is rather convoluted. It's more narrative driven than the past entries have been, which I feel most of the other entries were more like vibes focused and just like spooky feelings rather than a strong narrative to bring you through. I really enjoyed this one because it made clear that the Bone Orchard mythos is firmly in the Cthulhu, Elder Gods, eldritch horror style of storytelling. There is a part in this book where they literally introduce you to the pantheon of these ancient evil gods and talk about like biblical connections, biblical allusions within this world building. So really enjoyed it. The story is about a group of people living in this apartment complex that get teleported to a alternate realm where they now have to dive 7 layers down into this world in order to escape. All the while, they're being menaced by these creatures that can shapeshift into anybody, by gigantic monsters, traps. There's a section where they get to a place that seems idyllic, but it's actually all like rotted over, and they have to leave there as well. There was a wide variety of fairly stock characters within this book, but I feel like it did a good enough job establishing their relationships with each other and the ones that formed along this journey enough to make it an entertaining read. This ended up as a 5-star because I really like cosmic horror, and I felt like this one, again, was the most direct in giving you an idea of what this world is supposed to be about. Reading Tenement also inspired me to go back and reread over the whole of the Bone Orchard mythos. So I read through Prelude, which is just a single issue of a comic book. This is 100% vibes. It basically tells a story of a person getting menaced in a swamp and then definitely replaced by a body snatcher. This one, bizarrely, was a free comic book day comic, I think back in 2022, and it wasn't reprinted in any of the other collections. Like, you would think that it would just be like a backup in one of these, but I think this might be the only way to read it, which is an odd choice. The passageway expands on the universe a little bit. This is about a geologist, I believe, who's called to this island that just has like a lighthouse and like one outbuilding and a giant hole in the ground that goes down deeper than it should. You can see on the cover here, this is a drone from above, right, going down into a hole. Again, mostly vibes. Like, it's it's incredibly esoteric and unclear what is happening during a good bit of this book, but it does introduce some of the iconography that is more rounded out in Tenement. And with Prelude and this book, I feel like there are characters that are related to characters in other books. If you like read between the lines, there's a whole online community that is trying to untangle these connections, which is fun. But if you're just reading through casually, again, there's not a whole lot here. It's spooky, and the art style is definitely interesting. Like, the art style is definitely challenging. The way that it presents its pages, right? So like you have these very crazy shots, even things like this with the spot, like with the concentric circles running down the page. So So a lot of really like challenging artwork and storytelling that holds a lot back from the reader. But if you're into that just like creepy aesthetic and you just want something that is creepy vibes, this is a strong one. There was another book I read that was like that was creepy vibes, another comic book. I want to say it took place in the Hellboy universe. Ginny Finn, I want to say it was called. And that one did not work for me, but these work for me quite well. And then I also reread through 10,000 Black Feathers, which was the second to last entry in the series. This one, as they progress, they get a little bit more like narratively coherent. This one does tell the story of two girls who in their teenage years meet up and hang out in the basement, coming up with stories and making this fantasy world. One goes missing and the other is searching for her. Something between a mystery and a quest to find this lost girl. This is somewhere on the border between like horror and action adventure, because while our protagonist does fall into the same horror-filled world as exists in the other books, she takes on a much more active role of seeking out her friend, and it's clear that they're going to like fight these demons, fight these evil forces as best they can while they're down there. Whereas the characters in Tenement seem to have less agency in getting anything accomplished. So that's why I'm saying that it feels like more of an action adventure kind of thing, like Dark Tower a little bit. This would be my second favorite in the line. I like the story between the two girls of like a found family, a comfort in one another, and then a drifting apart as they get older. I felt like those were themes that really resonated with me and brought this book beyond just a ooh spooky stuff's happening. It actually had some character moments in it, had some good emotional beats, while still being a fairly short book at only I think 5 or 6 volumes. And of course we still have completely unhinged artwork, which is nice to see. And that's going to do it this week. I really appreciate you sticking around to hear me talk about all of the horror books that I read in the past week. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in any of them. What were your thoughts? What were you reading during Summerween? How's your year of reading going? We're a little over halfway. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please remember to like and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.
I hear you. It is not the spooky season. It is not October.
Well, there's a readathon last week to read spooky books.
Summerween.
Summerween.